Some wounds are visible only to those who know what darkness looks like. She thought makeup could hide the truth. She thought long sleeves and summer heat would be enough. She thought if she smiled just right, no one would see the fractures beneath her skin. But the Vampire King didn't look at her the way humans did. He looked deeper. He saw everything. And when he finally understood what had been done to her, the ancient creature who had walked through centuries of blood and shadow made a promise that would shake the foundations of both their worlds. He'll pay for every mark. The August heat clung to the city like a fever, thick and unrelenting, but Alara Morrison wore long sleeves anyway. The cream-colored blouse covered her arms completely, buttoned to the wrist despite the humidity that made her skin slick with perspiration. She'd learned to ignore discomfort. Discomfort was manageable. Exposure was not. She stood outside the iron gates of the Blackthorn estate, hesitating as she always did before entering. The mansion loomed against the twilight sky, a Gothic structure of dark stone and arched windows that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. It had stood at the edge of the city for over 200 years, a monument to old wealth and older secrets. Alara had worked here for 6 months as an archivist, cataloging the extensive private library that filled 3 floors of the East Wing. The position had been unexpected. A quiet job listing that appeared exactly when she needed it most, offering generous pay and, more importantly, solitude. The owner, Lucian Blackthorn, was rarely seen during daylight hours. He conducted his business at night, appeared only in evening hours, and left her to work in peaceful isolation among the books. It was perfect, almost safe. She pushed through the gate, the iron cold even in summer, and made her way up the gravel path. Her reflection caught in one of the ground floor windows. Pale skin, dark hair pulled back too tightly, eyes that looked perpetually tired. She'd applied foundation carefully that morning, layering it over the yellowing bruise on her left cheekbone, the one that was finally fading after 2 weeks. The front door opened before she could knock. Mrs. Calloway, the estate's housekeeper, stood in the entrance, a severe woman in her 60s with silver hair and an expression that revealed nothing. Miss Morrison, Mr. Blackthorn would like to see you in his study before you begin work this evening. Alara's stomach tightened. In 6 months, she'd been summoned to his study exactly twice. Once when she was hired, once when she'd asked permission to work later hours to avoid complications at home. "Of course," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Mrs. Calloway led her through the mansion's dim corridors. The interior was as dark as the exterior. Burgundy walls, mahogany furniture, heavy curtains that blocked the dying sunlight. Candelabras provided most of the illumination, casting shadows that moved like living things across the walls. They stopped before a carved oak door. Mrs. Calloway knocked once, then departed without waiting for a response, her footsteps receding into silence. "Enter," came the voice within, low, cultured, with an accent that belonged to no single place or time. Alara pushed open the door. Lucian Blackthorn's study was circular, housed in one of the mansion's towers. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, and a massive desk of black would dominated the center. Behind it sat the man himself, illuminated by the warm glow of an antique lamp. He was, as always, unnervingly beautiful. Pale skin that seemed carved from marble, dark hair that fell to his shoulders, features that were too perfect to be entirely human. But it was his eyes that unsettled her most, gray like winter storms, ancient and knowing, capable of focus so intense it felt physical. Those eyes were fixed on her now. "Miss Morrison, please sit." She moved to the chair opposite his desk, conscious of every step, every breath. She'd always felt he could hear things others couldn't. The acceleration of her pulse, the catch in her breathing when she lied about why she'd arrived late last Tuesday, her keys clutched so tightly they left marks in her palm. "I want to discuss your work," Lucian said, steepling his fingers. He wore a black suit despite the heat, immaculate and perfectly tailored. "You've made remarkable progress with the collection, the medieval manuscripts in particular. Your translations have been exceptional." "Thank you, sir. However, I've noticed you've been distracted recently. Your hours have become irregular. Last week you left several volumes unshelved, which is unlike you." Shame burned in her chest. She'd been so careful. "I apologize. It won't happen again." I'm not reprimanding you. Ilara. His use of her first name startled her. He'd never used it before. I'm concerned. The kindness in his voice was worse than anger would have been. It made the walls she'd built threaten to crumble. I'm fine, she said automatically, the lie she perfected over months of repetition. Lucian was silent for a long moment, his gaze never leaving her face. Then he stood, moving around the desk with a grace that was too fluid, too precise. He didn't walk so much as flow, each movement economical and deliberate. He stopped a few feet away, and in the lamplight, she saw his expression change. The professional courtesy fell away, replaced by something sharp and focused. A predator catching the scent of blood. "Look at me," he said softly. It wasn't a request. Ilara lifted her eyes to meet his, and in that moment, she knew he saw it. The foundation she'd applied so carefully that morning had begun to break down in the heat, and there, just below her eye, the shadow of the bruise was visible. The temperature in the room dropped, not metaphorically. The air itself grew cold, as if winter had suddenly invaded summer. The candles on his desk flickered, their flames bending toward him. "Who did this to you?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried an edge that made her bones ache. "It's nothing. I fell." "Don't." The word cut through the air like a blade. "Don't insult both of us with that lie." Ilara's hands began to shake. She clasped them together in her lap, trying to maintain some semblance of control. "It's personal. It's not your concern. Everything that happens to those under my protection is my concern." Lucian moved closer, and she caught his scent. Something like cold earth and ancient wood and winter rain. "How long has this been happening? Please, I just need this job. I can't afford to lose it. You think I would terminate your employment because someone is hurting you?" Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Tell me who. Tell me his name." She shouldn't. Every instinct screamed at her to stay silent, to protect the secret, to maintain the illusion that she could handle it herself. But sitting there in that darkened study with a man, if he even was a man, who looked at her as if her pain mattered, the words slipped out. "Marcus. His name is Marcus Brennan. We've been together for 2 years. And he strikes you." It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. "It's not always. Sometimes he's sorry. Sometimes he—" "Stop." Lucian's voice was gentle now, but beneath the gentleness was a current of absolute fury. "You will not make excuses for him. Not here. Not with me." Tears burned in Ilara's eyes. She blinked them back, refusing to cry in front of her employer, but one escaped anyway, tracing a hot path down her cheek. Lucian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. When she didn't move, he brushed the tear away with his thumb. His skin was cold against hers, but the gesture was impossibly tender. "I want you to listen to me very carefully," he said, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made the world narrow to just the two of them. "You are not weak for enduring this. You are not at fault for what he's done. And you are not alone anymore. I don't understand. This Marcus Brennan. Where does he live?" Ice formed in her stomach. "Why?" "Because," Lucian said, his voice dropping to something ancient and terrible, "he is going to pay for every mark he's left on you, every bruise, every moment of fear, every tear. I am going to make him understand exactly what he's done, and when I'm finished, he will never touch you or anyone else again." The way he said it wasn't a threat or a boast. It was simply a statement of fact, delivered with the certainty of someone who had spent centuries making and keeping such promises. "You can't," Ilara whispered, even as part of her desperately wanted him to. "If he found out I told someone, if he thought I went to police or... he will never know you spoke to me. He will never have the opportunity to hurt you again. I give you my word." Lucian's hand moved from her face to rest gently on her shoulder. "But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Ilara looked into those ancient gray eyes and saw something she hadn't expected. Humanity, not despite the darkness she sensed in him, but somehow because of it. He understood pain, not as an abstract concept, but as an intimate, personal truth. And he understood protection not as a duty, but as a choice, a deliberate commitment to stand between the vulnerable and the darkness. She'd been protecting herself for so long, had convinced herself that she had to, that no one else would or could. But sitting there in that circular study with shadows dancing on the walls and a man who was clearly more than human offering her safety, she felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Hope. He lives in Riverside Apartments. Building C, Unit 304, she heard herself say. He works night shifts at the warehouse on Industrial Boulevard. He leaves at 10:30 p.m., gets home around 7 in the morning. Lucian nodded slowly. Good. You've done well. He returned to his desk, pulling out a key from a drawer. Tonight, you're not going home. Mrs. Calloway will prepare a room for you in the East Wing. You'll stay here where it's safe. I can't just... Yes, you can. And you will. His tone brooked no argument. Whatever belongings you need, I'll have them retrieved tomorrow. Tonight, you rest. You work if it brings you comfort, or you simply exist in peace. But you will not return to a place where you've been harmed. The tears came then, a release of pressure she'd been holding for months, maybe years. Ilara covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs that she tried desperately to contain. She felt Lucian move again, heard the rustle of fabric, and then a handkerchief was pressed gently into her palm. It was silk, embroidered with initials in silver thread. L.B. It's all right, he said quietly. You're safe now. I promise you're safe. And somehow, impossibly, she believed him. Ilara woke to unfamiliar softness. For a moment, suspended between sleep and consciousness, she forgot where she was. Then memory returned in a rush. The study, the confession, Lucian's promise. The guest room was larger than her entire apartment. Four-poster bed with burgundy curtains, antique furniture that belonged in a museum, and tall windows that overlooked the estate's gardens. Morning light filtered through sheer drapes, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. She sat up slowly, her body aching the way it always did lately, a constellation of healing bruises and pulled muscles that created a constant, dull pain. But here, in this room that smelled of lavender and old wood, the pain felt different. Acknowledged, witnessed. A knock at the door made her tense. Miss Morrison? It's Mrs. Calloway. I brought breakfast. The housekeeper entered with silver tray laden with food, fresh fruit, warm croissants, coffee that smelled like heaven. She set it on the bedside table with practiced efficiency. Mr. Blackthorne asked me to inform you that he'll be occupied with business matters today, but you're welcome to use the library as usual. There's also a selection of clothing in the wardrobe, if you need anything more comfortable than what you arrived in. Ilara looked down at herself, still wearing yesterday's long-sleeved blouse and dark slacks. Mrs. Calloway, what exactly does Mr. Blackthorne do? His business, I mean... The housekeeper's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Mr. Blackthorne has many interests, Miss Morrison. He's been a collector, an investor, a patron of arts and sciences. Currently, he deals primarily in acquisition and protection. Protection? Of valuable things, rare things. Mrs. Calloway moved toward the door. Things that deserved to be kept safe from those who would damage them. She left before Ilara could ask what that meant. The day passed in a strange suspension of normalcy. Ilara worked in the library, cataloging a collection of illuminated manuscripts from the 15th century, losing herself in the careful work of translation and preservation. But periodically, her mind would drift to Lucian's words. He's going to pay for every mark. What did that mean? What was he planning? And why did the thought of someone finally standing up for her, finally seeing her pain as worthy of action, make her feel both terrified and profoundly relieved? Evening came like a hell breath. The sun set in shades of crimson and violet, and as darkness claimed the estate, Ilara felt a change in the atmosphere. It was subtle, a shift in air pressure, a sense of awakening in the old house, as if the building itself had been sleeping during daylight hours. She was shelving books when she heard footsteps in the corridor. Lucian appeared in the library doorway, and she was struck again by his otherworldly presence. He wore different clothes now, black trousers and a deep gray shirt that made his eyes look like storm clouds. His hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp architecture of his face. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Better. Thank you for all of this. She gestured vaguely at the room, the house, the safety. You didn't have to. I did, actually. He moved into the library with that liquid grace, running his fingers along the spines of books as he walked. There are very few absolute truths in this world, Alara, but one of them is this. Those who have power have a responsibility to use in defense of those who don't. And you have power. Yes. It was a simple acknowledgement, without boast or apology. Alara set down the book she'd been holding. What do you even do to Marcus? Lucian turned to face her fully. In the lamplight, his eyes seemed to glow faintly, though that had to be a trick of the illumination. I'm going to have a conversation with him. I'm going to help him understand the consequences of his actions. And I'm going to ensure he never has the opportunity or the will to harm anyone again. You're going to kill him. No. Lucian's expression was unreadable, though I won't pretend the thought doesn't have appeal. But murder is messy, and frankly, death will be too quick an ending for what he deserves. I have other methods. What methods? Do you trust me? It was the second time he'd asked her that. Alara thought about it, really thought about it. This man who had given her safety without hesitation, who had looked at her bruises with fury not directed at her weakness, but at the person who caused them, who spoke of protection as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Yes, she said quietly. I do. Something in Lucian's expression softened. Then trust that I will handle this in a way that ensures your safety and his accountability. You don't need to know the details. You just need to heal. I want to know. The words surprised her even as she spoke them. I need to understand what's going to happen. Lucian studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Come with me. He led her through the mansion's corridors to a part of the house she'd never entered before, a descending spiral staircase that ended in a heavy iron door. Lucian produced an old key, the lock clicking open with a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the enclosed space. Beyond was a chamber that made Alara's breath catch. It was circular, like his study, but this room was clearly much older. Stone walls covered in symbols and text in languages she didn't recognize. A large oak table in the center, its surface inscribed with intricate patterns. Shelves lined with objects that ranged from mundane to impossible. Crystals, aged leather journals, vials of liquid in colors that seemed to shift in the lamplight. This is where I work, Lucian said simply. Where I've worked for a very long time. Alara moved to the nearest shelf, her archivist training automatically cataloging what she saw. A bronze mirror with handles shaped like serpents. A box made of bone, carved with protective symbols. A collection of daggers that looked ceremonial, their blades inscribed with words in Latin and what might be ancient Greek. You're not human. It wasn't a question. No, I haven't been for 237 years. He watched her carefully, gauging her reaction. Does that frighten you? She should say yes. Any rational person would say yes. But standing in that chamber with its accumulated centuries of knowledge and power, Alara felt something other than fear. She felt curious, fascinated, and strangely still safe. What are you? The term you would recognize as vampire, though the reality is more complex than folklore suggests. Lucian moved to the oak table, his fingers tracing one of the inscribed patterns. I was turned during the French Revolution, left to navigate eternity with no guidance and too much time to think about the nature of power, mortality, and morality. And now I try to use what I am for something better than what I was created for. The hunger is always there, the need for blood, the predatory instincts. But over time, I've learned to choose who I am despite what I am. He looked up at her, which brings us to Marcus Brennan. Lucian opened one of the journals on the table, revealing pages filled with dense handwriting and diagrams. There are abilities that come with age and discipline, hypnosis, compulsion, the ability to rewrite certain neural pathways, to influence thought and behavior at a fundamental level. Understanding dawned cold and complete. You're going to compel him. I'm going to ensure that the very thought of violence toward another person fills him with such visceral horror that he becomes physically incapable of acting on it. I'm going to implant an association between his past actions and overwhelming guilt. Not enough to destroy him entirely, but enough that he carries the weight of what he's done for the rest of his life. Lucian's voice was clinical, precise. And I'm going to make certain that he never remembers you. Your name, your face, the fact that you ever existed. All of it will be gone from his memory. You can do that. I can. He closed the journal. It's a violation, of course. An invasion of free will. And under most circumstances, I wouldn't consider it. But for someone who has used their free will to repeatedly harm another person, who has made a pattern of violence and control, I have no moral qualms about removing his ability to continue that pattern. Elara processed this, her mind working through the implications. And if it doesn't work, if the compulsion fades, or it won't, when I bind something, it stays bound. There was absolute certainty in his voice. You have my word, Elara. He will never hurt you or anyone else again. She moved closer to the table, looking down at the symbols and patterns. Tonight, he'll be leaving for his shift in an hour. I'll intercept him, have our conversation, and by dawn it will be finished. Lucian paused. You can stay here in this state. You never have to see him or think about him again. But Elara shook her head slowly. I want to be there. What? Not close. Not where he can see me. But I want to be there when you confront him. I need to see it. She met Lucian's eyes, her own burning with something she hadn't felt in years. Agency. I need to watch him understand that he doesn't get to do this anymore. Lucian regarded her with an expression that might have been respect. It won't be pleasant. I won't hurt him physically much, but I will make him feel every ounce of fear and powerlessness that he made you feel. If you watch that, you can't unsee it. Good. The word came out fierce, surprising both of them. He made me feel small for 2 years. He made me believe I deserved it, that I was weak for not leaving, that no one would believe me if I spoke up. I want him to feel small. I want him to understand what it's like to be powerless. A slow smile crossed Lucian's face, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It was sharp and dangerous and entirely approving. Then you'll come, but you'll stay in the shadows, where he can't see you. Agreed? Agreed? Good. He moved toward the door, then paused. Elara, for what it's worth, you were never weak. Survival is its own form of strength. Never doubt that. The word settled into her chest, warm and solid, something to hold on to in the darkness ahead. The night air was cool as they drove through the city in Lucian's car, a sleek black vehicle that moved through traffic with predatory ease. Elara sat in the passenger seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, watching familiar streets pass by with new eyes. Everything looked different now. The city she'd navigated in fear for 2 years had transformed into a hunting ground, and she was no longer prey. You can still change your mind, Lucian said quietly, his eyes on the road. I won't. They parked 3 blocks from the Riverside apartments, in the shadows between streetlights. Lucian turned off the engine, and for a moment, they sat in silence. When we get there, I need you to stay back. There's an alley across from his building with a fire escape. You'll be able to see but remain hidden. He turned to look at her, his expression serious. If at any point this becomes too much, if you need to leave, I want you to go. Don't worry about me. Don't wait. Just go. Mrs. Calloway is on call. 1 phone call, and she'll come get you. Understood. Elara nodded, her throat too tight for words. They exited the car and moved through the streets like ghosts. Lucian's movements were so quiet, so precise, that she found herself unconsciously mimicking his steps, learning a new way of existing in space, as observer rather than target, as witness rather than victim. The Riverside apartments were exactly as she remembered, a tired, run-down complex of brown brick and rusting metal railings. Building C sat at the back, its parking lot half full of vehicles in various states of disrepair. Marcus's truck, a beat-up Ford with a dented fender, was parked in its usual spot. Lucian guided her to the alley he'd mentioned, helping her up the fire escape's first flight of stairs. From there, she had a clear view of the building's entrance and the parking lot. The metal beneath her was cold, the sounds of the city distant and muffled. He'll come out in about 15 minutes, Lucian said, checking a watch that looked antique and expensive. I'll be in the parking lot, waiting. Remember, stay here. Stay quiet. Don't interfere no matter what happens. I won't. He squeezed her shoulder once, gently, then melted back into the shadows with a speed that made her question whether he'd been there at all. Ilera waited, her heart pounding hard enough that she could feel in her throat. The minutes stretched, each one an eternity. She found herself remembering the last time she'd been here. 3 days ago, when Marcus had been angry about dinner, when he grabbed her arm hard enough to leave fingerprints, when she'd locked herself in the bathroom until he left for work, then gathered enough courage to slip out and drive to the estate. She thought she'd never come back. And she wouldn't. Not as the person she'd been. That version of Ilera, the one who flinched and apologized and made herself small, was dying tonight. The apartment door opened. Marcus emerged, exactly on schedule, dressed in his warehouse uniform and carrying his dingy lunch bag. He was a big man, 6'2", broad-shouldered, with the kind of casual strength that he'd used to intimidate her into submission. Handsome in a rough way, with a charming smile, he deployed strategically to make people think he was a good guy, just a little intense, just passionate. Ilera's hands clenched on the fire escape railing. Just seeing him made her body respond with learned fear, accelerated pulse, shallow breathing. The urge to make herself invisible. Marcus walked toward his truck, keys jingling in his hand. He was whistling something tuneless, completely at ease, unaware that anything was about to change. Then Lucian stepped out of the shadows. He moved with deliberate slowness, giving Marcus time to register his presence. The whistling stopped. Marcus turned, his posture immediately defensive, the stance of someone who expected confrontation and knew how to handle it. "Can I help you?" Marcus's voice carried across the parking lot, aggressive and challenging. Marcus Brennan. Lucian's voice was conversational, almost friendly. "I'd like to have a word with you. Don't know you. Not interested." Marcus turned back toward his truck. Lucian moved faster than human perception could follow. One moment he was standing 10 feet away. The next he was directly in front of Marcus, close enough to touch. Marcus stumbled backward, his eyes widening. "What the—" "I said," Lucian repeated, his tone unchanged, "I'd like to have a word, and you're going to listen." From her vantage point, Ilera watched Marcus's expression cycle through confusion, then anger. He was bigger than Lucian, heavier, and she knew from experience that he was used to using that size to dominate. She saw him puff up, getting ready to assert physical control the way he always did. "Listen, buddy, I don't know what your problem is, but you need to back the hell up before—" Lucian's hand shot out, gripping Marcus's throat. Not crushing, but firm, an unbreakable hold that lifted Marcus slightly off his feet. The bigger man's hands came up instinctively. Try to break the grip. But Lucian didn't even seem to notice the struggle. "Before what?" Lucian asked, genuinely curious. "Before you hit me? The way you hit her?" Marcus's eyes went wide. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't." The single word carried such weight that Marcus stopped struggling. "Don't insult both of us with lies. I can hear your heart rate increasing. I can smell the adrenaline in your sweat. I can sense guilt like blood in water, and Marcus, you're drowning in it." Lucian released him, and Marcus stumbled back, coughing. But when he tried to run, he found he couldn't move. His legs simply wouldn't obey him. "What were you?" Marcus's voice had lost all its aggressive edge, replaced by genuine fear. "I'm someone who doesn't appreciate men who hurt women. I'm someone who has lived long enough to recognize evil in its mundane forms. And I'm someone who's going to make sure you never raise your hand to another person for as long as you live." Lucian circled Marcus slowly, predatory and deliberate. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to look into your eyes, and when I do, you're going to feel every single moment of pain you've ever inflicted. Every bruise, every slap, every time you made someone smaller than you feel afraid. You're going to experience it all, compressed into a single instant of perfect clarity. And then—" He stopped directly in front of Marcus, his gray eyes beginning to glow with an inner light that wasn't reflection. "Then you're going to forget her. Her name, her face, the sound of her voice. She will be completely erased from your memory. But the guilt, the horror of what you've done, that stays. Every time you even think about raising your voice in anger, every time your hand forms a fist, you'll feel such overwhelming revulsion that you'll be physically incapable of following through. You'll spend the rest of your life remembering that you hurt people, but never being able to remember who or why. Just the unbearable weight of knowing you did something unforgivable. Please. Marcus's voice broke. No. Lucian stepped closer. There is no please. There is no mercy for someone who showed none. There's only consequence. Their eyes met, and even from her distance, Alara saw the moment Lucian's power took hold. Marcus's body went rigid, his mouth open in a silent scream, every muscle locked in place. It lasted for perhaps 10 seconds, though it felt longer, a stretched moment where the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. Then Marcus collapsed to his knees, gasping, tears streaming down his face. He looked up at Lucian with an expression Alara had never seen on him. Pure, unfiltered terror. What did I do? Marcus sobbed. What did I do? I can't remember, but I know it was terrible. I know I hurt someone. I can feel it, but I can't. You can't remember because you don't deserve to, Lucian said coldly. You lost the privilege of knowing your victims. You lost the privilege of asking forgiveness. You get to live with the weight of your sins without the comfort of understanding them. That's your punishment, Marcus. That's your reckoning. He leaned down, his voice dropping to something barely audible. And if you ever, even consider violence against another person, what you're feeling now will be a pleasant memory compared to the agony I'll inflict. I'll know. I'll be watching. And I will come back. Lucian straightened and walked away, leaving Marcus kneeling in the parking lot. Crying, confused, his memories thoroughly rewritten, his capacity for violence surgically removed from his psyche. Alara watched from the fire escape, her own tears falling silently. It wasn't satisfaction she felt. Not exactly. It was closure. It was validation. It was a physical manifestation of something she needed desperately. Proof that what happened to her mattered, that it was real, that someone cared enough to make it stop. Lucian appeared beside her. So suddenly she gasped. It's done. I know. Her voice was hoarse. Thank you. Don't thank me for doing what should have been done long ago. He helped her down from the fire escape, his touch careful and respectful. You deserve protection from the first moment he hurt you. The world failed you. I'm just correcting a small part of that failure. They walked back to the car in silence, leaving Marcus behind, broken and confused, but no longer capable of breaking anyone else. 3 months passed like a strange dream, the kind where you wake up uncertain if what you experienced was real or simply wished into existence by a desperate heart. Alara moved permanently into the Blackthorn estate, into a suite of rooms on the 3rd floor that became her sanctuary. The space consisted of a bedroom with tall windows facing east, a private sitting room lined with bookshelves she was slowly filling with her own collection, and a bathroom with a clawfoot tub deep enough to submerge incompletely. The walls were painted a soft gray blue, and heavy curtains in deep burgundy could block out the world entirely when she needed solitude. She continued her work in the library during evening hours, cataloging the centuries of knowledge Lucian had accumulated. But more than that, she began to live again, not in the frightened, calculated way she had before, measuring every word and movement against the possibility of violence, but with genuine ease. She walked through hallways without checking over her shoulder. She spoke without weighing every syllable for potential offense. She existed without the constant, exhausting vigilance that had defined her life for 2 years. The transformation wasn't instant. There were still nights when she woke gasping from nightmares where Marcus found her, where Lucian's intervention had been a dream and she was still trapped. There were moments when unexpected sounds made her flinch, when her body remembered fear even as her mind knew she was safe. But those moments grew less frequent, the spaces between them filled with something she'd almost forgotten. Normalcy tinged with the extraordinary. She learned that Mrs. Calloway had been with Lucian for 40 years, had known what he was from the beginning, and had chosen to stay because someone needed to make sure he ate properly and didn't become a complete recluse. The housekeeper had been a nurse in her previous life, had lost her daughter to domestic violence, and had found in Lucian's mission a way to channel her grief into purpose. He saved my granddaughter. Mrs. Calloway had confided one afternoon while they worked together in the kitchen, the older woman teaching Alara to make proper scones. My daughter's husband, he was escalating. I could see it happening, but she wouldn't leave, and legally there was nothing I could do until it was too late. After we lost her, he got custody of my granddaughter. Can you imagine? A man who'd killed her mother, and the courts gave him the child. Her hands distilled in the dough, flour dusting her fingers like snow. Mr. Blackthorne heard about the case. He made a visit to that man, and the next day, my son-in-law voluntarily signed over custody and checked himself into a psychiatric facility. He's still there, 20 years later, convinced he's too dangerous to ever be released. My granddaughter is 30 now, married, happy. She doesn't remember much about those early years. That's his gift. He gives people the chance to forget the worst parts and remember only that they survived. Alara had understood then that she wasn't the first person Lucian had saved, wouldn't be the last, and that the household she joined was built on a foundation of shared understanding about what it meant to be broken and reconstructed. She learned that the estate employed 3 other people beyond Mrs. Calloway, a groundskeeper named Thomas, who had been a detective before early-onset Parkinson's forced his retirement, a security consultant named Sarah, who was a former FBI agent with a specialty in predatory behavior, and a lawyer named David Chun, who handled the legal complexities of Lucian's various interventions and had been grateful for the vampire's help after his sister was nearly killed by a stalker. They were a found family of survivors and protectors, each drawn to Lucian's mission to their own experiences with the failure of conventional justice. They met monthly for what Mrs. Calloway called council meetings, discussions of potential cases, ethical considerations, and the ongoing work of making sure that those Lucian had corrected remained stable and harmless. Alara attended her first council meeting 6 weeks after Marcus, sitting nervously in Lucian's study while the others gathered. She'd expected judgment, perhaps, or pity. What she found instead was acceptance and respect. "You're here because you survived," Sarah had said bluntly, her sharp eyes assessing Alara with professional interest, "and because you chose to transform that survival into purpose. That takes strength most people don't have. Welcome to the family." She learned that Lucian owned properties across 3 continents, a villa in Tuscany where he lived during the Renaissance, an apartment in Tokyo acquired during a decade spent studying Eastern philosophy, a cottage in rural Ireland that had belonged to the woman he'd loved and lost. He'd accumulated wealth through careful investments over 2 centuries, had watched empires rise and fall, had seen humanity at its best and worst. And he used that wealth, that time, that accumulated wisdom primarily for what he called correction work, finding people who abused power and ensuring they couldn't anymore. "I've been doing it for decades," he explained one evening as they sat in his study. Alara curled in the leather chair across from his desk, nursing a cup of tea while he worked through correspondence. The lamplight cast warm shadows across his face, making him look almost human despite the preternatural stillness of his posture. Abusive spouses, corrupt officials, criminals the system can't or won't touch, predators who hide behind respectability and social standing. I find them, I use my abilities to rewrite the dangerous parts of their psyche, and I move on. Like a supernatural vigilante, Alara said, somewhat amused by the image of Lucian in a cape and mask. Something like that, though I prefer to think of it as applied behavioral modification with a side of poetic justice. He glanced up from his papers, a slight smile playing at his lips. "You're judging my moral framework." "I'm trying to understand it," Alara corrected. "The ethics of rewriting someone's mind, even someone who's done terrible things. It's complicated. You're essentially removing their free will. Only the parts of their will that were already being used to remove others' free will," Lucian said. "A man who beats his wife has already decided that her autonomy, her safety, her very existence is less important than his need for control. I simply ensure he can never make that calculation again. The rest of him, his personality, his memories, his capacity for joy or growth, remains intact. And you never feel conflicted about it." "Every single time," he admitted. "The moment I stop feeling conflicted, the moment I start seeing it as easy or justified without question, is the moment I become the monster I was for those first 50 years. The discomfort is important. It keeps me honest." And Ilara pressed, sensing there was more he wanted to say. I think, Ilara said slowly, setting her teacup down on the side table, that you're someone who was given terrible power and decided to use it for something good. That's rarer than it should be. Most people with power, supernatural or otherwise, use it to benefit themselves. You use it to protect people who have no other protection. Something shifted in Lucian's expression. A vulnerability she rarely saw, a crack in the carefully maintained facade of ancient control. I wasn't always good, Ilara. For the first 50 years after I was turned, I was precisely what you'd expect a vampire to be. Predatory, selfish, monstrous. I killed because it was easy. I took what I wanted because I could. I justified it as nature, as the food chain, as simply being what I was created to be. He set down his pen, his fingers spreading flat against the desk, as if grounding himself in the present. It took a long time and a great deal of pain before I decided to be something else. Before I realized that having monstrous capabilities doesn't mean you have to be a monster. What changed? Ilara asked softly, sensing this was a story he didn't share often. He was quiet for a moment, his fingers stilling completely. The eerie stillness of something that didn't need to breathe or fidget or perform any of the small movements that signaled life. I fell in love with a woman named Catherine who saw what I was and wasn't afraid, but also wasn't willing to let me be a monster. She was a doctor, ahead of her time in so many ways. She ran a charity hospital in the slums of London, treated people everyone else had abandoned. His voice took on a distant quality, as if he was seeing her again across the decades. She caught me feeding one night. Not killing. I'd stopped doing that, but feeding from a man I compelled to forget. She didn't scream or run. She just looked at me and said, "If you're going to take from people, the least you could do is give something back." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She put me to work. I carried supplies, protected her and her patients from those who would prey on the vulnerable, used my abilities to ease pain in ways medicine couldn't. She challenged me, pushed me to be better, made me see that power was a responsibility, not a privilege. And I fell completely, irrevocably in love with her. What happened to her? Ilara asked, though she could sense the tragedy in the way his voice had softened. She died. His voice caught almost imperceptibly, a minute break that would have been invisible to anyone who hadn't learned to read his subtle expressions. When she died of tuberculosis, knowing I couldn't save her, that my blood couldn't cure her, only turn her, and she wouldn't allow that, I had a choice. Become the thing her death would justify. Sink back into the monster I'd been, and let rage and grief consume me. Or become the thing she believed I could be. Honor what she'd taught me by continuing the work. When did she die? 93 years ago. March 17th, 1932, at 2:43 in the morning. The precision of his memory was heartbreaking, and I've tried every day since to deserve the faith she had in me, to be worthy of the love she gave so freely to a creature that didn't deserve it. Ilara set down her teacup, her throat tight with emotion. Over the past months, her relationship with Lucian had evolved into something she couldn't quite define. He was her employer, certainly, though the cataloging work had become more collaborative exploration than formal employment. Her protector, absolutely. She felt safer in this house than she'd ever felt anywhere. But there was also a friendship there, built on late-night conversations like this one, shared silence in the library, and the unique intimacy of being truly seen by another person. And lately, something more. Something that made her pulse quicken when he entered a room, that made her hyper-aware of every accidental touch when they worked side by side, that filled her dreams with gray eyes and cold hands and a voice that promised safety. Something that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "Lucian," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, "what happens now? With me, I can't stay here forever as your employee, cataloging books and existing in this bubble. Eventually, I'll need to figure out what comes next, what I'm supposed to." "You can stay as long as you want," he interrupted, his intensity startling her. "Forever, if you choose. You're not my employee anymore, Ilara. You haven't been for a long time. The work we do together, it's collaboration between equals, not a job." Then what am I? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither had been brave enough to voice. He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the gardens with that fluid, impossible grace. The moon was full tonight, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. You're someone I care about deeply, someone whose company I treasure more than I've treasured anyone's in longer than I want to admit, someone who makes me remember what it's like to want to be human again, to feel things beyond the eternal monotony of existence. Alara's breath caught. She stood as well, her legs feeling unsteady as she moved toward him slowly. I'm not afraid of you. You know that, right? After everything. After seeing what you can do, knowing what you are, I'm not afraid. I know. He turned to face her, and in the moonlight, his eyes looked like liquid silver. You should be, though. I'm dangerous. Alara, not to you, never to you, but in general. And a life with me, even friendship, even companionship, means living in shadows, understanding darkness, accepting that the world isn't what most people think it is. It means knowing that the monsters are real and that sometimes they're the ones trying to do good. I've lived in darkness for 2 years, she said, stopping just in front of him, close enough to feel the cold that radiated from his skin. But it was the wrong kind, the kind that made me small, that convinced me I was worthless, that taught me to be invisible. You showed me a different kind, the kind that protects instead of harms, that chooses to be gentle despite having the capacity for violence. I'm not afraid of your darkness, Lucian. I'm grateful for it. His hand came up slowly, giving her every opportunity to step back, to reconsider. When she didn't move, he cupped her face with a gentleness that belied his supernatural strength. His skin was cool against hers, familiar now after months of accidental touches, and carefully maintained distance. You deserve so much more than what you've been given, more than survival, more than safety. You deserve joy, Alara, light, warmth, everything that's good in the world, everything I can't give you. Maybe, she whispered, leaning into his touch, her own hand coming up to cover his. But right now I just want this. You, whatever this is between us. I don't need sunlight picnics and normal dating, and all the things I'm supposed to want. I just need this. Someone who sees me as strong instead of broken, who looks at my scars and doesn't flinch. You don't know what you're asking for, Lucian said, but his thumb was tracing slow circles on her cheekbone, his control visibly fracturing. I'm asking for honesty. I'm asking for connection with someone who understands that strength comes in different forms. I'm asking for you to stop treating me like I'm too fragile to choose what I want, like I'm some delicate thing that will shatter if you let me close. Her voice strengthened with certainty. I'm asking for you, exactly as you are, vampire, vigilante, protector, whatever you want to call it. I'm asking for all of it. Lucian's eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for fear, for any sign that she didn't understand the weight and irrevocability of what she was saying. But Alara had never been more certain of anything in her life. She'd spent 2 years doubting herself, questioning her worth, accepting less than she deserved. She was done with that version of herself. If we do this, he said finally, his voice low and rough with emotion, if we cross this line, there's no going back. You'll be part of my world completely. All of it. The danger, the secrecy, the complexity of existing in the spaces between human and other. And I won't be able to give you a normal life. No wedding announcements, no aging together, no simple, uncomplicated future. I don't want normal, Alara said with absolute conviction. Normal almost destroyed me. Normal was smiling through pain and hiding bruises, and pretending everything was fine while I died inside. I want real. I want someone who sees my scars and doesn't look away. I want late nights in dark libraries and honest conversations, and someone who understands that the most important battles happen in shadows. I want you, exactly as you are, for however long you'll have me. The last of Lucian's carefully maintained resistance crumbled like ancient stone. He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, to reconsider, to choose safety over the unknown. And when she didn't, when she rose on her toes to meet him halfway, her hand sliding up to rest against his chest. Their lips touched in a kiss that felt like coming home to a place she'd never been. It was gentle at first, careful, both of them hyper-aware of boundaries and consent and the weight of what this moment meant. But as Alara's arms came up around his neck, as Lucian's other hand settled at her waist and pulled her closer, the kiss deepened into something profound and transformative. It tasted like promise and possibility, like darkness that nurtured instead of destroyed, like finding safety in the most unexpected place imaginable. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, though only one of them technically needed to breathe, Lucian rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "You're absolutely certain? Because once I allow myself to want this, to want you, I won't be able to go back to careful distance and professional boundaries." "Completely certain," Alara said, her smile radiant and unguarded. "I've never been more certain of anything." "Then I'm yours," Lucian said simply, opening his eyes to meet hers. "For as long as you'll have me. Which, I should warn you, could be a very long time." Alara laughed, the sound bright and genuine, the first truly unguarded expression of joy she'd allowed herself in years. "I should warn you, I'm very difficult to get rid of once I've decided to stay. Ask Mrs. Calloway. I've been rearranging the library for months despite her very reasonable organizational suggestions." "Good," Lucian said, his own smile matching hers, rare and beautiful and entirely real. "I have excellent job security for difficult people, and a mansion large enough that you can rearrange every room if it makes you happy." They stood there in the moonlight, holding each other, two people who had found safety and possibility in the most unexpected configuration. Outside, the world continued its rotation, indifferent to the small miracle happening in that old mansion. But inside, in that study with its walls of books and its shadows, and its promise of protection, something new was born. Not just love, though there was that tentative and growing and unlike anything either had experienced before. Not just healing, though there was that too, the slow mending of wounds that went deep in the skin. But the radical idea that strength could be found in vulnerability, that darkness could be chosen instead of feared, and that sometimes the monsters were the ones who remembered most clearly what it meant to be human. Alara thought about the woman she'd been 3 months ago, frightened, hidden, convinced that she was too broken to deserve better, that her pain was somehow her fault. That woman was gone, not erased but transformed, integrated into someone stronger and more complete. Someone who knew that survival was its own form of power, and that asking for help wasn't weakness. "What are you thinking?" Lucian asked, his thumb tracing slow circles on her back, the touch gentle and grounding. "I'm thinking that I'm grateful. For you, for Mrs. Calloway and Thomas, and Sarah and David. For this house and this library and this completely impossible second chance." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes fully. "And I'm thinking that I want to learn what you do. How you find the people who need correction. How you make the decisions about who to help and how. I want to be part of it, not just a recipient of protection, but an active participant." Lucian's expression became serious, the levity of the moment before shifting into something more weighted. "That's a significant commitment, Alara. What I do isn't easy. It means confronting human cruelty on a regular basis. It means seeing the worst things people are capable of and not being able to save everyone. It means making difficult, sometimes impossible choices about intervention and free will and the limits of what we have the right to change, even in the name of protection. It means using power to protect instead of harm," Alara countered. "It means being the person who steps in when no one else will or can. It means making sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to others, or that if it does, there's someone who will see it and act." Her voice was steady, certain, carrying the conviction of someone who had found their purpose. "I understand the weight of it, Lucian, and I want to carry it anyway. I need to carry it." He studied her for a long moment, his ancient eyes seeing beyond surface certainty to the steel underneath. Then he nodded slowly, a decision made. "Then I'll teach you. Everything I know about psychology, about reading people, about identifying the patterns of abuse and control. You'll learn to see what I see, to sense the warning signs that others miss. You'll learn about compulsion and its limits, about the ethics of intervention, about when to act and when to let human systems handle things." He paused, his hand coming up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. But you'll do it as my partner, Ilara, not my subordinate, not my project or my student, my equal in this work. Because you bring something I don't have, recent, lived experience of what it's like to be trapped, to need saving, to navigate the aftermath of trauma. That perspective is invaluable.